I'll be presenting today on creating a positive classroom environment to promote active inquiry learning in science classrooms. The first thing that you need to know is characteristics of a positive learning environment. Planning for inquiry learning requires teachers to create a classroom in which students are active participants in the learning process. And this was found in our science textbook, Content Tweed, Bass and Karen, copyrighted 2018, and page 49. Rosenthal proposes a four-factor model to help explain how teachers convey their expectations to the students. Those four factors are climate, feedback, input, and output. In regards to climate is conveyed non-verbally by smiling and nodding. It can also be conveyed by frowning or shaking your head. Eye contact and body position are important as well. This is the tone in which all teacher and student interactions take place. Feedback is affective, meaning it is positive or criticism, and also cognitive, meaning that it focuses on content, detail, and quality. It is the response to student action or communication. Input is the quantity or quality of information provided to the student. Teachers teach more to students that they have a high expectation of. And output. Output is the responsiveness of the student. Teacher encourages greater or lesser responsiveness through verbal and nonverbal cues. Another area is the science learning environment. There are four different environments that can be implemented to promote inquiry learning. The first is learner-centered. It encourages attention to preconceptions and begins instruction with what students think and know. Knowledge-centered focuses on what is to be taught, why it is taught, and what mastery looks like. Assessment-centered emphasizes the need to provide frequent opportunities to make students' thinking and learning visible as a guide for both the teacher and student in learning and instruction. And then also community-centered encourages a culture of questioning, respect, and risk-taking. So this would be done in your small groups or whole group discussions. A positive learning environment has several things. Teachers and students share the responsibility for learning. Teachers establish and model norms for positive interactions. All people in the classroom are supportive, collaborative relationships, and they are all in place at all times. Mutual trust among teachers and students. There is a community of practice focused on learning for all, and a focus on intellectual rigor, constructive criticism, and challenging of ideas exist. So in this last one, students can constructively criticize or have open conversations with other students based on things that they're discussing in class or anything like that. The discussions are not just one-sided. They are challenging to each other, but also it's collaborative, it's supportive, and there's no major issues in the discussions. The recommendations that are outlined for the physical environment to promote inquiry-based learning, table grouping configuration should support different kinds of activities. So when you group tables together, you could have them to where they can work in small groups, to where they can work individually, or where they can all be a part of the whole group discussion. Equipment and materials needed to be accessible. So you would have supplies be easily accessed by students. They could either be at those table groupings or on a counter nearby for things that they would need. Students should be involved with the management and organization of classrooms. So students should know where things need to go back when it's over, where to get them from to begin with, and managing themselves as far as getting those things back there before and after any type of activity. Resources need to be posted around the room, and they're selected to support student learning. So this is where you would hang lab instructions. It's where you would put up any type of resources that the students could use while they are working on activities or skills in their groupings. Procedures for where to find late work, turning in papers, etc. are understood by all. So in order for students to be productive in the actual science physical environment, They need to know where and how to do things on their own without having to have a lot of teacher input or reminders for that. Recommendations for the social-emotional environment. So the social-emotional environment of our students is just as important as the physical environment that they are contained in. The teacher must model and provide guided practice for desired interaction. So the student should see the teacher interacting with other students in the same way that she or he would want the students to interact with each other. Build and promote positive relationships between and among students and teachers. So there should definitely be frequent interactions between not only the student and the teacher, but also student and their peers. Inviting student participation, teacher always, including students in discussions, inviting them to give their ideas or their stance on things that are being covered in the class. Also, planning and managing time effectively. This not only falls on students managing their own time and planning to finish activities in a timely manner, but also on the teacher. The teacher should be modeling this, planning and managing time effectively for the students to see. And then also to provide a strong focus on continual reflection. So consistently the teacher should be having students reflect on assignments that they are doing, activities that they're engaged in, and just constantly reflecting on the unit of study that they are conducting. Recommendations for a student-centered environment. So in the inquiry-based classroom, you want to have a student-centered environment. And ways to do that are to engage in reflection. We just talked about that one. Keeping students constantly reflecting on things that they're learning in class as they work through units and skills, either in groups or individually. Set individual learning goals. So these should be proximal and long range. So this would be something you could set up with your students, have a little meeting time with each student and discuss their learning goals and goals that you have for them, things that can be completed quickly or things that would be progressed out over a period of months or even the entire school year. Also take action to further their own learning. So students need to go to others. They need to use materials that are at their hands without constantly going to the teacher and asking questions and looking for feedback and support there. They can use their peers. They can look at those resources that we had talked about earlier that would be hanging on the wall and finding those materials that can help them with that as well. Engage in metacognition and learn how to self-assess. So they should be able to see if what they're doing is working, and if it's not, figuring out a way to change that up and find a way that would work better. Designing the learning environment. So here is where it's important to use and implement a variety of learning strategies to help students meet the 4 standards for proficiency in science. Teachers must also develop a positive learning environment where students will actively engage in learning activities. So there should always be some kind of engaging activity being implemented in the classroom where students are experimenting to learn. Good lessons begin with an engaging experience that encourages students to wonder. And this can be seen in the engage phase of the 5E lesson plan. And it should be designed with the following in mind. You can create a hook that draws in students, relate academic knowledge to familiar experiences, motivate students, assess prior knowledge, and identify current conceptions, and engage students in a question that can be investigated. Planning for classroom safety. In any science classroom, we all know that safety is essential. Safety in the science classroom is critical, it is necessary, and must always take place. Safety in the science classroom is often closely tied to class size, teacher to student ratio, and the room size and arrangement. One thing that our textbook talked about was making sure that students there is not where they are crowded together, but also not where there are large open spaces where they feel the need to either run or move excessively inside the classroom. So you want to set up the classroom in a way that is pertinent for learning. At the beginning of the year, post, model, and enforce a list of safety rules that students should always follow. And this is something that teachers need to do. If you're asking students to wear goggles, you should be wearing goggles. If you're asking them to wear certain safety gears or anything like that, then you should be doing that as well. It is a good idea to create a science safety contract appropriate to your grade level for students and parents to sign. Engaging parents in this and involving them in this process adds another level of security for the teachers as well as support for students who do not follow the safety contract. Another thing is that animals can be a great addition to the classroom as students can learn about the animals themselves and how to care for them. But making sure that students understand animal safety as well is a huge thing. Washing hands before and after handling animals, knowing their interactions with the animals and things that they can do and things that they should avoid doing is important as well. Managing student behavior is a big thing for having a positive environment for the science classroom. Classroom management is the #1 issue of concern cited by pre-service teachers in the area of largest frustration for current teachers. A lot of teachers deal with management issues in their classroom, and these are some ways that you can combat some of that. Surprisingly, having students up out of their seats and engaged in learning can decrease the classroom disruptions because students are actively engaged, they are actively experimenting, and their minds are busy on what they're supposed to be doing and not on moving around the classroom and causing those disruptions. Teaching procedures also helps with student behaviors. Establishing procedures from the very beginning of the year and enforcing those throughout with consequences for students who do not do that helps a lot with student behavior. Establishing a classroom learning environment focused on learning through inquiry is a critical factor for effective science classroom management. So having students learn through these inquiry-based activities is a huge way to cut down on student behavior issues as well. Classroom arrangement options. Whole class structure. This is where the teacher lectures, demonstrates, or guides the whole class in discussion. Cooperative group structure. Students in small groups collaboratively collect data, organize it, and exchange ideas, and they arrive at individual understanding of learning targets. A pair structure is where 2 students are working together to construct action and demonstration. And then an individual structure is where each student works individually on an investigation, collecting data, recording it in a science journal, and then generating explanations and answering relevant questions. Okay, and here are just basically a wrap-up of everything that has been presented in the professional development, and that is respect for students' ideas, questions, and contributions is evidence. Active participation of all is encouraged and valued. Interactions reflect positive working relationships between teacher and students. Interactions reflect effective working relationships among students and their peers. Students are encouraged to generate ideas and questions. Intellectual rigor, constructive criticism, and challenging of ideas are evident in a safe and respectful way. And that concludes the professional development on positive learning environments for inquiry-based science classes.